Right? If you are a pharmacist in the US, you're working in sales, right? I work in manufacturing sector here, so I'm just doing one portion. But if you were to start a company, an import and distribution, you're actually doing everything from beginning to end. So you'll be able to do not only, incorporate a business, develop, supply, find a supplier. Not only do you do your own marketing registration with the FDA, but then also you get to hire actually pharmacists to go out and promote your product. And then you can do post-sale analysis and pharmacovigilance. It's your responsibility as an importer to do these things. So if you open a company and import and distribute, you're doing all of this. So it's a highly disciplined profession, and I don't think of a better group to do this than the people in this room. To get a license, the EPPAD now, it's called, issues a license, and the Ministry of Trade. And to do that, you just incorporate a business, either as a family business, an individual business, or a share company, a PLC, whatever you want to call it. And then the requirements are fairly simple. You need to have a pretty decent office and a pretty good warehouse to store your product. And then that's the minimum requirement is about 100 square meter in office. You need to have a pharmacist, 1 or 2 pharmacists, and a secretary. That's what you need to obtain a license. Before issuing the license, obviously the FDA will come and inspect the facility, make sure that it is conducive to storage of products. Depending on what kind of products you end up bringing, they might ask you to have a cold storage requirement if you're bringing insulin or something. One of the biggest hurdle for most people is as they fail at this step, which is to find a supplier. Here, this is the strategy that I use and our company uses to find suppliers, and you can choose to use it. But the first thing is you need to find and identify where do you want to source these products. Do you want to source them from Europe or Asia, right? If you're going to bring a product from Asia, you're competing on price in the market. If you're bringing products from Europe, obviously you'd have to, you're selling quality of product, so you're not competing on price. And then think about your strategy and look at the pharmaceutical trend in the country, right? Now we're getting away from anti-infective now, a lot of the medication, a lot of the prescriptions are in the areas of cardiovascular and metabolic conditions. The second is do your due diligence. Assess the supplier, make sure that the supplier is going to provide you a quality product, because like I said, the EPPAD it's an agency that does inspection on paper, and that's just the reality. If your goal is to supply quality products to the market, it is your responsibility to sort of determine, because people are taking these medications, so the consequences are severe. So sort of do your own due diligence, put in some thought behind it, and say if you're going to source a product from Europe, which is what we do, you're going to supply quality products, so you don't really care too much about the price. The other one is negotiate on contracts and offers. Right? There are a certain contract language that the EPPAD would require you to have, which is that if there's a recall, how are you going to collect your products from the market? If there's some adverse event, what are you going to do? Who's going to be responsible for that? So those are included in the contract that you will sign between yourself and the supplier. The other one is it's your responsibility not only to market and sell the product, but also to do some pharmacovigilance work. And then once you agree with your supplier, then you have to submit that contract to the regulators. The regulators will approve your contract, and they either go, if your suppliers in Asia, they go do an inspection. If it's Europe or the US, what we call stringent regulatory authorities, then there's no inspection requirement. So I'm just going to skip the slide. Now that you have you have your license, now you're ready to register your product. You found a supplier, and this is another big step that if you work in the U.S. in FDA or some sort of regulatory work, you're doing this. We call it biological license application in the biotech world here. The rest of the world, we call it CTD dossiers. This is a document that details out how a product is made from day one to sourcing the raw materials until packaged and leaves as a finished product. It's a 200 plus PDF document. You don't have to do anything with this document. The supplier will provide you this document. Your responsibility is to submit this document to the EFDA so that you can get authorization to import your product into the market. These are the different levels. It has 5 different sections. It talks about quality control, if you did any clinical studies, and what's the labeling, what's the leaflet, how is the product stored. All this will be given to you. Your responsibility as an importer is to provide it to, have 2 minutes, to provide it to the agency so that you can get approved. Otherwise, your product will be considered a counterfeit product. Some things to keep in mind: there are fees associated with registration of a product, like any other business, right? There's minor fees here and there. It takes about 9 to 12 months on average. The FDA here takes about 6 to 9 months to approve a product. In Ethiopia, it's about 9 to 12 months. Approval is required, so whether you bring 1 product or 100 from the same supplier, each product has to be authorized and given marketing authorization before you are allowed to import it. And once you obtain marketing authorization, or what we call MAs, it's good for 5 years. So unless something changes in the manufacturing of the product, there's no variation. You can continuously bring it for 5 years, and then you have to sort of reapply to the FDA, say that you're going to continue bringing it, and that there's no change to the product. I mean, some of you know that there's been products in the market for 30 years in Ethiopia, right? They continuously come into the country without. The registration process is it's not a lot simpler, but it's a lot better than what it used to be. Now you can do, I do the registration for our company myself from here. Everything is done online. Your document is submitted online, your marketing authorization, sort of communication with the agency is done online. Now, not only can you register and receive authorization for your product online, you have to generate purchasing orders online with the agency now. There's a lot of things that's improving under the current leadership of Ministry of Health in Ethiopia, and then this is one of them, and we found it to be a great improvement. Let's just review this. Now that you got your license, you found a supplier, you registered your product, you're ready to import. To import, you have to generate a PO, obviously, a purchase order, pro forma, the old language. Then that PO goes to the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health will check to make sure that that product that you are intending to bring has been registered and given authorization to come. Then that PO goes to the bank, obviously, where it dies out for about 6 months for your LC to get approved. And then the product is manufactured, and you get to bring it. Once the product comes in, it usually comes in through Bode Airport. Hardly any product comes through Djibouti, because pharmaceuticals usually are not shipped by sea, unless there are circumstances. They usually come through planes. Once it gets to customs, it gets actually checked either the same day or within 48 hours. It gets checked to make sure that the product that's coming in is authorized, right? You have your marketing authorization certificate in your hand, and then they have the product on their hand. So they actually do like for like, make sure that the product, the packaging, the temperature, everything is on. If there's any kind of laboratory testing that needs to be done, it usually happens at this time. But usually that laboratory testing is not. Now you're ready to distribute your product, right? Now the product comes in. There's 2 ways to do it. You can hire your own medical representative to go around and sort of introduce your product to doctors, so that doctor can write the prescriptions for it. And it's your responsibility to have the product available in the pharmacy, so that the patient goes and they can get the product. The second is you can use wholesalers. They're authorized, as mentioned before, by the agency to distribute products. So you can bring it in, and then you can give it to them, and then they have the sort of the know-how and the connections to do so. And unfortunately, they are just the key in Ethiopia, and you can't do anything without them. The wholesalers pretty much have access to the market. Some of the biggest challenges, well, availability of currency, foreign currency. That's the biggest challenge now for most people. Usually you have to wait 6 months to get some foreign currency given to you. The other is the demand is so high. You bring in a product that rarely leaves a capital city. And, you bring a product, the product is sold, and at least within a matter of weeks. so that the majority of the people, the majority of Ethiopians live outside of the capital city. So those people have no access to the product. And I'm going over time, sorry. Let's just skip. Why do you want to do it? Well, it's a highly disciplined profession. You're just repeating what you're doing here, but they're making a pretty large impact. Some of the work that we do, you know, the impact is so small here. Why? Because there's a ton of us doing the same kind of work. There, it's just going to be you supplying one product to the market, and that makes a difference. Imagine if that person was able to find metformin, right? I mean, we bring metformin. But imagine, I mean, it makes a huge difference to people's life. There's a highly skilled workforce in Ethiopia ready to be employed. There's a lot of pharmacies graduating from pharmacy schools, and it's a great way to create jobs for them. Economic conditions are very receptive. Now you can create a foreign diaspora account, so you can use your own funding. So that gives you sort of a leg up from the importers that are in the country, right? You can use your own currency from here to import products, so you don't have to wait. That's what we use. And these are some of the things that you do. Take what you learn. I mean, this is that's why you're here, and invest your resources, and you're going to get great return on your investment. Unfortunately, the discussion around these kind of events is always framed around helping your country. This is more than helping your country. You're helping yourself. Unless we see investment in Ethiopia, so why are the Chinese investing in Ethiopia? Because it's a great return, not because they care about the population. Right? They can invest it anywhere else, but they invested in Ethiopia. Why? Because they get 30, 40, 50% return on your investment. So it's the pharmaceutical import and distribution is the rate of return is good. You can improve business operations. People are very receptive to your ideas. They're open. Even the agency is open. They can suggest ideas on how they can regulate better. And it's truly, you could make an impact on someone's life. It's a great long-term investment. Right? A lot of people say, I want to move back to Ethiopia, but I don't know what to do. Start this now. It's a highly disciplined profession. You can do it from there, and then it's just a long-term project for you and your family. And then it's everybody's responsibility to create a very healthy and thriving Ethiopia. Some of the progress that we've made, the steering committee was formed. We put out a feasibility study. In terms of reference, we have some responses from people, and the next step is we're going to select consultants to do the feasibility study, and we'll share that information with you, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I think we're going to go swiftly to the next presenter, Mr. Amba.
Thank you all for staying over, and I know we don't have too much time, so I'll get straight into my presentation. I asked that we don't do any background or any information, because I thought that would just take more of my 10 minutes. So I thought I'll just get into it. So I'll just give you a quick, second introduction to me. I've been in the industry, pharmaceutical industry, for coming on 30 years. I started actually in the lab. I have a background in immunology, and after that I worked in various pharmaceutical companies. I currently run a biotech company as well, focused in bladder cancer. So that's just a quick snapshot about me. So I'll cover a little bit on fundraising and really looking at startups. A lot of the speakers have already mentioned a lot of what I would mention, so I won't get into it. That will save me some time, obviously, to go through it, and I'll try to get to the end as quickly as possible here. Again, thank you for the organizers and the board of the directors for inviting me to give this presentation. So with that, you already heard, really Africa itself, if you look at the market, it's a fast-growing market, and really there's tremendous unmet need on the continent. If you look at really anywhere from the estimates from somewhere from $45 to $60 billion is really the impact of the pharmaceutical industry. That's centered around the top 15 countries that you see listed there. That's Angola, Cameroon, Egypt, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, and so on and so forth. Those are the major countries that constitute, for example, nearly $37 billion of the $45 billion in 2020. That's the estimate for that. We covered much of this as well, talking about the 375 drug manufacturers in Ethiopia. But what's really critical really is the Ethiopian pharmaceutical market, somewhere around 700 million to $1 billion, depending on what data you look at. There's a true unmet need. We've all talked about the importance of it, whether as an importer, whether really as a manufacturer itself. I think the establishment of the African Medicines Agency in 2018 by the African Union plays a very big important role in structuring an investment thesis and also an investment environment for other investors, outside investors, to come in, including EPPAD, as well as joint venture partners that may be looking at coming into the continent, especially specifically Ethiopia. So if you really look at the challenges of healthcare, and many of the presenters talked about this, I'll just focus your attention to the right side of the screen. Really the top 10 causes of death in Ethiopia, most of it are really neonatal disorders, diarrhea diseases, lower respiratory infections, TB, especially MDR, multi-drug resistant TB is a big issue. And now as people are living a little bit longer, you're getting cardiovascular issues, as well as HIV, AIDS, cirrhosis. You see breast cancer listed down there. A lot of it has a lot to do with the lack of diagnosis, or really knowing what to even diagnose and go after. And people don't even recognize they have it till much later in the latter stages of the disease. And there are more cancers. That is kind of my area of expertise, is really in the oncology field, and I'll tell you that there's a true unmet need in that particular area, much less. And as people are living longer, even including Ethiopia, we're going to see more and more of that. So this is a little bit on the development of the pharmaceutical industry. It's a very busy slide. I'll just focus your attention to the middle part of it. So if you look at the left-hand side of this slide, it talks about an uncompetitive, industry where there's few established players within the industry. All the way to the right, you're talking about South Africa and you're talking about Nigeria. Those are probably the best examples of those types of countries that are within that. Ethiopia is somewhere between the sizable industry and the maturing piece, straggling in between, probably more on the sizable industry, but really not going forward, just because of the sheer volume of lack of manufacturers within that environment that they're in. Again, busy slide, but really just to show you that there are important constituents and partners that we need to work with to establish this. There are other multiple players, whether it's a joint venture type of opportunity, whether it's using NGOs, whether it's using other types of groups that may have a particular interest, but there are different constituents that play a role in it. I'll really bring your attention to the orange part of that slide, from basic research all the way to delivery and use. You see that, for example, the Gates Foundation plays a tremendous role in the first 3 stages of it, and they've done a tremendous amount of work, including in Ethiopia, and really building upon various clinics and also access to medicines as well, including supplementing what the government is doing through PFSA and other sources. So this is really direct from the Ethiopian Pharmaceutical 10-year plan. If you look at the pharmaceutical companies in the middle, there are all the other players that they work with, whether it's government entities on the top, international community organizations, other types of country partners that you work with, such as Korea that was mentioned earlier today, supporting industries that play a role in it, educational institutions that can do scientific exchange, regulatory exchange, and so on and so forth, suppliers, whether it's API-based suppliers, customers, distributors, or importers that play a role in it, and related industries. This is all the entire ecosystem of players that you play with in this industry. So when you're funding a pharmaceutical venture, there are many ways to go about doing this. Obviously, these are just some examples and approach. Ernest spoke a little bit about our own internal thinking for EPPAD particularly, but you can look at biotech incubators, you can look at innovation centers with an African focus, for example. You can look at JV, which is what we're looking at, or tech transfer. You can look at venture capital opportunities. You can look at revenue-based financing, especially if you focus on a high volume particular drug. that has some revenue, you can actually use that revenue to really finance your next phase of your process in there. You can look at grants, you can look at NGOs, or even sovereign wealth funds as well that have a tremendous interest in moving on to Africa. It's an investable market because there's a true return. Not only are you doing the right things for your country, but there's also an investable thesis that investors can actually listen to. And that's what really should be a prime focus for us moving forward. Private investments from biotech and pharmaceutical experts and players within that space, private individuals that are willing to invest. And there are a tremendous amount of private individuals that are willing to invest in other parts of the world. I sit on a steering committee for a BioAngels investment group myself. I'll tell you, we have companies from around the world that actually pitch us different ideas for us to invest in. These are the types of ideas we will look to invest in. We've got 2 funds up to $2 million that we invest in different companies ourselves. So those are things that really we need to make ourselves available to those types of opportunities. And again, if you really look at what are the critical factors of it, we already know there's already an accessible local market. The stability in having the regulatory framework, although the EFDA still needs a lot of our support to solidify really its processes and systems that they have in place, having the appropriate capital structure in place, the innovation-friendly environment, which is the tax pieces of it, prior access, proper access to info, adherence to high regulatory standards. We are really, Ethiopia is in what I call the storming phase of the industry. We're not norming yet, we're storming, and that storm may take a while, but we need to participate in order for us to actually have an impact during that build phase. So if you look at some examples of tech transfer, there are a number of companies that have done tech transfer, whether it's AstraZeneca and multiple diseases throughout Africa, Celgene, which has done it in multiple areas as well, and Merck as well. So there are numerous examples of where tech transfers happen, meaning a big manufacturer who wants to actually, okay, I've got the 5-minute warning, thank you, who want to actually manufacture in different parts of the world. This is an example. Local manufacturing, is obviously more cost competitive. There's no question about that. There's an example of where in Ethiopia, where a local player became the first in line to provide the next new generation antibiotic. The government added it to its drug list, and also then it became the main player. So again, the government's desire to spur local manufacturing base, which also limits the utilization, obviously, of foreign currency, which is one of the things that everybody has spoken about earlier as well, is also an important place for us to play in. So I'll skip through this slide and really focus in on different aspects of investments and really different groups of investors that can fund. And what I have listed here are really the types of investors on the left-hand side, whether they give you grants or equity or debt is one approach that they go. So if you look at incubators, for example, they give you grants and equity. Angel investors, they're grants and equity pieces of it, or debt. Small to medium foundation, different organizations go about funding different concepts and ideas, especially this type of manufacturing type of facilities, and also pharmaceutical companies as well. So again, this is kind of an algorithm that investors look at, and also people like us who are looking to set up an organization, we would look at that as well. So this is, can you set aside enough capital to repay the financing? Which way would I go? This is an algorithm that we can follow in that process. For example, on the left-hand side here, you see VC-backed approach, no equity, or a blended approach, or revenue-based financing approach. And there are different series in which you would invest in, depending on how you structure the organization. So this is just an example of how RBF works, for example. This is just one example to walk through. Basically, you using your sales to finance your entire manufacturing base at some later stage. So this will come in a much later stage. What are critical action steps to undertake for financing? And this is something that we all have to think about as we're moving into this area. Obviously, knowing the investor base is critical. Next piece is know what you are and what you can do and what you are not. That's also a very critical point. Selling the opportunity to the science of what you're serving. Make sure that you've got really the right players within your team. Because people invest in people. I mean, if you're an investor, you look at the team first, because those are the people that you are actually going to invest in to do the work. So you can have the best idea. The best idea goes down in flames if you don't have the right plan, and more importantly, the right people at the end of the day. So that's a critical element, and I believe that was mentioned earlier as well. So getting our evaluation right, presenting a credible business case, and presenting really an exit plan. Anybody who invests in this will like to see a return at the end of the day. So it has to be a credible enough plan for us to go through. These are a couple of examples of a business case that we've pulled up. On the left-hand side, you see a capital block investment cost estimate. Again, this is just hypothetical estimates that we pulled that have really some foundation within which it was pulled. One you see here at 6.5 million, the other is at 2.2 million, depending on the setup. This is really the type of investment that it would take. Again, if you actually retailer this and focus this into a particular therapeutic area, you may not need as much, or if you're doing one line or two lines, you may not need as much. But this is the type of examples and level of details that we're going to go through. So again, thank you all for your attention and for your time.
If I can quickly ask the previous speakers to come to the table, so we can have the panel discussion. And I'm going to adopt Mr. Ambao's model and briefly introduce the moderator. Mr. Emerald is an Associate Director for Systems of Care team under Market Access and has over 14 years of experience working for Novartis Pharmaceuticals. His philanthropic experiences include the following. He served as a member of Refugee Health Committee and Minnesota Department of Health. He served as a co-chair of Parish Health Program at BSNA Church in Minnesota. He also served as advisory committee Invest Health, a project of Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And lastly, he was the advisor for East Africa Medical Relief Foundation. Please welcome Mr. Emerald.
Maybe sound older than I actually am. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for spending your Saturday evening with us. We appreciate it. Thank you for turning the lights on. I sense some people may be getting sleepy. So yeah, my name is Kalalai Emru. I'm a member of EPPAD. I also help serve on the investment advisory committee or steering committee. And I'm going to be moderating the panel discussion here with the three. So thank you, Ambao and Hermes, for the update. And we'll have you up here, and then we'll start with a few questions. Again, just similar to the previous discussion, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. You may also ask these questions in a mark if you prefer. Okay, I'll start with one of my own. I think, Nelly, maybe this might be directed towards you. In terms of the general public right now, how can, or what is the best thing that they can do, or how can they best help advance our efforts here at EPPAD? Sure, yeah.
I think one of the things that most of you in this room can do is actually participate in this project so that we could get the projects sort of to the next phase. And the second thing you could do is really think about how can you start either an import and distribution business, or what can you do, because we wanted to make an impact now, right? That's what my talk is about. Doing the import and distribution and make a difference next year. It's going to take you a year to register and import the product. Then that product will be readily available to people to take it. So start thinking about that aspect of the investment. Also, just get involved in this project.
Thank you. Okay, my next question, I guess this might be directed towards you. terms of looking at some of the advancements that's being made in Ethiopia or Ethiopian pharmaceutical industry, who's making the greatest advancement, and which company can we really model ourselves after? Or anyone of you can answer.
Thank you so much. We got the opportunity to communicate and consult with some of the CEOs of the local companies. And personally, I have tried to begin with them and also the state, more specifically with Karamazov, who is the steering committee members of the university. And he was actively trying to communicate and bring relevant information to our team. I will specifically direct this question to you because we have been doing this effort specifically.
It's a very good question, but at the same time, it's very difficult to precise answer. Number one, my experience has been different experience in Ethiopia, and therefore, it's just first-hand information that I got from Ethiopia, which leads me really to say something about to answer the question, I don't think that there is a answer. Because the feedback that I got from Ethiopia, from friends and others, even who are running import business, when I asked them what you advise if you want to collaborate with local manufacturing firm that they moving forward for this EPPAD project, the answer was, honestly speaking, we don't advise you to collaborate with any of the local pharmaceutical manufacturing company. And therefore, I think I gave you the answer in an indirect way. And I'm sure you understand.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes. In terms of, I guess, stating your background, or you can answer this next question here. What is our, I guess, biggest challenge that we have that we stand today in the foreseeable future? And how can we, I guess, eliminate the gap and some of the pitfalls?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we talked about earlier is really setting a mission and vision of where we want to be as an organization and what will be our area of focus. Once we at least have a mission in place, it's much easier to kind of put our energies all together and drive towards that mission, whether it's a particular therapeutic area or drugs or those kind of things. And the next piece is obviously seed capital. We need that to get off the ground and really to establish the credibility that the individuals involved will have in front of potential investors. There ways earlier that we discussed about setting up six and so forth, all those aspects of it. But really, even post that, naturally, the community is not known to have a lot of trust in various investments and so on and so forth. So really establishing that is the bigger advice.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Please.
Hi, ሁላችሁንም አመሰግናለሁ። ዛሬ እዚህ መጣችሁ። Is there anyone who can understand Amharic? No? You can. Okay. I can speak in English. ለምንድን ነው በአማርኛ ማውራት የፈለጉት ብላችሁ ብትጠይቁኝ፣ እንግዲህ ወንድሞቼ ዘመዶቼ ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ያለው የመድኃኒት እጥረት የመድኃኒት መጥፎነት ማለት እንግዲህ counterfeit medications, no standard medications, non-efficacious medications, ብዙ actually you know that not only in Ethiopia but in Africa a lot of antimicrobial drugs are sold in open market. You know? Yeah, and no one actually knows whether those are pharmaceutical products or just a start, as Philly said. You can't really tell. So I guess I like your ideas. It's a great idea. Investment is important. If you want to make a buck, yeah, your idea is great. But if you want to make a difference in that country in terms of providing quality, efficacious, right, and high standard drugs, I think what you need to start is start some kind of advocacy as well, right? If the government is always, lacking in their efforts, then whatever money that you put in that country is not going to make any difference, right? So the earlier anecdote about metformin, that's a simple thing. In Ethiopia, if you read literature, in Ethiopia, antimicrobial resistance is going through the roof, right? There are a lot of counterfeit medications in the country, mostly economically motivated. So I guess I want, as my friend says, define your value better, right? If you define your value better, then I think you'll be successful in your business. Otherwise, what you will be doing is that you will be collaborating with companies that are not even WHO doesn't certify them as CGMP manufacturers, then you are adding to the problem. So I just wanted to say that. Right. And one thing, by the way, the Office of Generic Drugs at the FDA provides a lot of training. A lot of Indians come, a lot of Chinese come, participate in that method. Actually, in the near future, there is something on wood manufacturing, right? And they also provide some assistance for small generic companies. I think in Naura, I know who's the generic company. I don't think we were talking about anything else, right? So for generic products, they are looking for manufacturers everywhere in the world because there is a lot of drug shortage in this country. So I guess I love your ideas, but work on the regulatory aspect in Ethiopia, because if that's weak, then your effort is not going to be bearing any fruit. Again, your objective should be providing efficacious quality drugs in Ethiopia, especially antimicrobial drugs in Ethiopia, right?
Thank you.
Once the second year of your economy, I'm just curious to know what type of efforts, whether from the government or from this organization, to create a conducive environment in Ethiopia that will support business efforts, and what the organization is doing in terms of working across different professional centers, maybe with the Lawyers Association. I think it's important to take a proactive measure. Working with bureaucracy can be quite difficult. So I was just curious to know how you guys are working with. There's also an organization called EPPAD, European Professionals Network, and Lawyers Association.
I can take that. Thank you so much. It's really a good recommendation and also a good question. This is one part of the EPPAD. We have different subgroups inside EPPAD. We have the policy and regulatory oriented groups who are working similar activity. And that group is actively trying to support the regulatory system in Ethiopia. And also we have another group which is led by Professor Research. That group is also trying to support the pharmacy school, the pharmacy specialists in Ethiopia. So I think this is one part which is trying to have an impact on the access to trade, access to quality assured education. So at the end of the day, we're going to have
Any additional questions?
እኔ በአማርኛ ነው የምናገረው። አክቹዋሊ ስመጣ በአጋጣሚ ነው የመጣሁት፣ ግን መጥቼ ባየሁት በጣም ተስፋ አድርጌያለሁ። ማለትም አድሬስ ያደረጋችሁት የኢትዮጵያን ችግር ብቻ ሳይሆን ችግሩን እየፈታችሁ ራሳችሁን በመጥቀበል ስለሆነ አይዲያው በጣም በጣም አድንቄዋለሁ። ምክንያቱም ብዙ ነን ፕሮፊት ኦርጋናይዜሽኖች አሁን ህዝቡ በዛ ላይ ነው ሞር እምነት የሌለው እንደውም፣ ምክንያቱም በዛ የማጭበርበሩ ፕሮሰስ በጣም የከበደ ይመስለኛል። በዛ ላይ ደግሞ ማንኛውም ሰው እንደዚህ አይነት ኦርጋናይዜሽን ውስጥ ሲገባ አፕፍረንት በፊት ለፊት ተናግረው ገንዘብን ለመስራት ነው የምሞክረው ስትል አይ ቲንክ ሞር መተማመንም ይሰጣል ብዬ አምናለሁ። እና በእኔ አስተያየት ከሆነ ትንሽ በራሴ አንዳንድ በሞከርኳቸው ነገሮች ውስጥ ተነስቼ አስተያየት መስጠት ብችል ቪዥናችሁንና ሚሽናችሁን ግልጽ አድርጋችሁ ከተናገራችሁ ብዙ ሰው አትራክት ማድረግ የምትችሉ ይመስለኛል። እኔ አሁን አትራክትድ ሆኛለሁ ባቀረባችሁት ነገር እና እንደኔ አይነት ሌሎች ሰዎች አትራክትድ ሆነው አብረዋችሁን ለመስራት ሆነ ኢንቨስት ለማድረግ ኢንትረስት ይኖራቸዋል ብዬ አስባለሁ። የኢትዮጵያ ችግር በጣም ብዙ ነው። እችን አንዷን ደግሞ በትንሹም ቢሆን እንሞክራት ብላችሁ ስለተነሳችሁ አደንቃለሁ። ከዛም ደግሞ በፕሮፌሽናችሁም ስለተነሳችሁ ጥሩ ውጤት ልታመጡ ትችላላችሁ ብዬ አስባለሁ። እና አሁን ፕሬዘንት ያደረጋችሁትን ፕሬዘንቴሽን ሚሽን እና ቪዥን ሰጥታችሁ በልዩ ልዩ ቦታ ሄዳችሁ ወደ ዲፍረንት ስቴትስም ሆነ ወይ ደግሞ ልዩ ልዩ ማህበራዊ ድርጅቶች ጋር ሄዳችሁ ፕሬዘንት ብታደርጉ አሁን እንኳ ባላችሁ አቅም ብዙ ሰው አትራክት ታደርጋላችሁ ብዬ አስባለሁ። በጣም ብዙ ፋርማሲስቶች አሉ፣ በጣም ብዙ ፊዚሽንስ አሉ፣ ነርሶች አሉ። ያ ሁሉ ይህንን የምታቀርቡትን ነገር አንደርስታንድ የሚያደርግ ይመስለኛል። አንደርስታንድ ማድረግ ደግሞ ፓርቲስፔት ለማድረግ ይረዳልና ጥሩ ስራ አደንቃለሁ።
አንድ የመጨረሻ ማስተያየት ልስጥና በፖሊስ ኤሪያስ እንዳለው በፖሊስና ሬጉላቶሪ ኤሪያ ስላለው የኢፓድ ፓርት እዛ ላይ ይሰራለሁ እና አንድ የተሰራ ያለ ነገር አለ። ያ የተሰራ ያለው ነገር በኢኤፍዲኤ እና በዩኤስ ኤፍዲኤ መሀል በሁለቱም ኢንስቲትዩሽን ቤዝድ የሆነ ግንኙነት ለመፍጠር የተጀመረ ሂደት አለ። እንዲያውም ከረንትሊ አንድ ሀበሻ ፋርማሲስት ዩኤስ ኤፍዲኤ ውስጥ የምትሰራ በፉድ ላይ የሰራች ያለች ኮሚኒኬት አድርገናት እሷ ዊሊንግ ሆና እዛ ያለውን ነገር ለመስራት ዝግጅት ተጀምሯል እና ሬጉላቶሪውን ለማጠናከር ሬጉላቶሪ ከተጠናከረ ማኑፋክቸሪንግ ኤንድ ቢዝነስ ሳይድም ይጠናከራል የሚል እምነት ስላለን በተቻለ አቅም ኮላቦሬቲቭ የሆነ ግሩፕ ለመስራት እየሰራ ነው ለማለት ነው። ጀስት ይህን እንዳስተያየት ልናገር።
Thank you. This will conclude the panel discussion, so we can get you all home early. So we're going to go into the next session, which will be a breakout session.